They didn't make a cookie-cutter quarterback in the 70s. You had the pretty boys, you had the clunky guys who were jalopies, you had the big buck studs, you had the really God Squad guys. You had a little something for everybody.
Getting 7 points here.
All 6 of them, you worked your tail off.
5 seconds left. 4, you dreaming? 3, that was 3.
7 only 2 questions, 2 weeks.
In this top 10, we're focusing on one position, quarterbacks, and one decade, the 70s.
Should I put my bell bottoms on?
The 70s was a glamorous decade.
That was a very strange time.
I don't think any other decade you look back on the styles with quite as much of a chuckle, maybe, as the 70s.
The big hats.
The shirts with the collars that came down to here.
Polyester was big. You know, I had a lot of polyester pants and shirts.
The fur coats.
The boots, the belts.
The beards. Flowered shirts. Big Fu Manchu.
The urban cowboy.
And the Nehru suits. Remember those?
Yeah, man. The high-heeled shoes. I mean, guys actually wore shoes with heels on. Yes, I did, and I think even somewhere in a closet I saved a pair.
Jumping jeepers! What's the matter with you guys?
It was just, it was crazy, man.
The 70s gave the NFL a fresh look, too. New stadiums, new teams, new turf, and new quarterbacks.
I just remember what a badass some of the quarterbacks were.
How about that, huh?
But the 70s was not a golden age for passing.
It was just a different game. I mean, even the 50s and 60s saw more passing than the 70s did.
You were dealing with a whole set of rules that made being a star passer different than today.
In the 70s. Come on, everybody paying attention. If it was 3rd and 14, I could sit the corner down at the sticks, and if you went to try to go by me, I knocked you down.
That was prior to 1978, when the NFL made it illegal to hit a receiver further than 5 yards from the line of scrimmage.
You're not gonna knock anybody down doing that, darling.
Despite the dead ball era, there were some fab quarterbacks in the 70s. So here's our list of the top 10, and these aren't just the QBs who had the most wins or best stats during the mid-decade.
The guy has to embody the flair of the 70s. So you have to have some personality, you have to be of the decade.
That's a tough list to put together.
Oh, I'm going to love this one. I'm going to love this one. Let's go.
The number 10 quarterback of the 70s, Archie Manning.
I don't know if Archie belongs on the list other than the fact that he sired Peyton Manning during this decade.
Peyton, who's your favorite football player then?
My dad.
Kids now think of Archie as Eli Manning's dad or Peyton Manning's dad, but this guy did have a history before that.
15!
He was a good player.
Before going all in the family, Archie Bunk Manning was a 2-time Pro Bowler, and he was the 1978 NFC Player of the Year.
I guarantee that every time a team played the Saints, they worried that Archie Manning was going to go off that day.
I remember watching Archie Manning as a kid and thinking, wow, this guy can pretty much do it all.
Where you can just close your eyes and see him running around and running around and running around. He's so much different than his sons because he was so mobile and so athletic.
And he would have, you know, a couple of great games a year where he single-handedly carried his team to victory.
When Archie Manning went to the Saints, everybody expected great things from Archie.
Manning's career at Ole Miss was swell enough to make him the number 2 overall pick by the Saints in the 1971 draft.
Look, when you pick that high, you're going to go to a team with a poor record. That they never got players after that either.
He should have hired an Indian Kemosabe because he was the Lone Ranger.
They never really improved, and they were a doormat all through his career.
I do think that Archie Manning should be much higher on the list. The only thing that kept Archie from being one of the greatest quarterbacks of that era was the team he was on.
The Caints, the Taints, the Aints.
Somewhere out there is a winning season, and someday soon, the Saints are going to find it.
But under Manning, the Saints never did find a winning season. During his 10 years in New Orleans, Manning won more than 5 games just twice.
Archie's problem was we'll never find out how good he was because he was always throwing from the back of his pants.
His 2 sons wouldn't be alive today if they played on the team he was on. He's still alive. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's still up to the quarterback, no matter how bad your team is.
Archie Manning, in his years with the New Orleans Saints, had a winning percentage of 26.3.
I mean, you look at that list, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the 70s, so yeah, I'd probably put him at 10.
By the mid-70s, mobile quarterbacks were hip, and when it was time to book, New England's Steve Grogan wasn't afraid to stick his neck out.
I believe he had the longest neck of any quarterback I played against.
Neck and neck with Grogan was the nimble-footed Jim Zorn, who led the expansion Seahawks to their first winning season in 78 and 79.
It was the early stages of the franchise, and he was the perfect quarterback for that team. He's still an iconic figure in the franchise history.
An athletic quarterback who followed an icon in Baltimore made it to number 9 on our list.
The number 9 quarterback of the 70s, Burt Jones.
He was as good a talent as I've ever been around.
He could throw it through a car wash and not get the ball wet.
John Riggins called him the toughest competitor he'd ever seen. Might have been the best pure passer.
One of the great forgotten players in NFL history.
Burt Jones follows Johnny Unitas. He's the guy who follows the guy.
Did we find the guy when we got this guy?
After 2 tough seasons, Jones won over fans in 1975 when he led the Colts to the league's first, worst-to-first turnaround.
The brilliant reversal in form from a year ago to win the Eastern Division Championship.
The great thing about Burt Jones was I watched him as a kid, and then to hear Bill Belichick 35 years later talk about...
In my career, I can't think of another quarterback that I would say had a better arm than Burt.
Nobody had a better arm than Burt Jones. He could throw it through a damn wall if he had to.
Burt had a laser. He had a great touch on the ball.
Burt Jones, Burt Jones, Burt Jones.
He was tough. He was fearless. He wasn't afraid to run the ball, take a hit. He was almost famous for, before he would get hit, to jump up in the air, and they would hit him and spin him around. He'd come down on his head and all that.
Because that was the first team that he had been a coach with.
One of the coaches come over to March Broda and say, what are we going to run? He said, I don't know, we'll see what Burt calls. That's the kind of confidence that Ted had in Burt, and I would say that's the kind of confidence that the entire team had in Burt. He was special.
Look inside. Ivory's a basic natural soap without heavy perfumes and deodorants.
Our number 9 quarterback was clean, but he wasn't just a pretty face.
Burt's got all the ability and the talent that anybody that's playing the game right now possesses. He knows how to run an offense. We got a lot of respect for him.
We did a research study to figure out the best quarterback seasons in NFL history, and the number 1 season was Burt Jones in 1976.
Player of the Year, Burt Jones threw for 24 touchdowns and was the league's only 3,000-yard passer.
For 3 years there, he was maybe the best quarterback in football.
3 playoff losses and a shoulder injury not even Hawkeye Pierce could fix kept Jones from a higher spot on our list.
He had the misfortune of being in the same era as a great Pittsburgh Steelers team, a great Oakland Raiders team, and then the injuries.
I don't know what happened. We didn't have MRIs. X-rays wouldn't show it. In those days, you almost had to have exploratory surgery. Whatever happened to his shoulder, probably a torn rotator cuff, they never operated on it. They kept thinking it was going to heal. He kept coming back, playing great, getting re-injured. Kept coming back, getting re-injured. Basically, his career was ruined.
He's going to go back in there and give it another try. The hurting Jones has a little time, fired, and it's caught by Carson. One of the guttiest performances by a quarterback.
To me, Burt Jones is in the Hall of Fame if he doesn't get hurt.
Had he not been banged up, certainly would be somebody we'd be talking much higher on our list.
The number 8 quarterback of the 70s, Ken Anderson.
We've got Ken at number 8.
Who do you have ahead of him? Kenny was the guy who didn't make mistakes.
That guy was very, very accurate and efficient.
He was marvelous. He was wonderful. He was one of us. He was not separated from us like a lot of quarterbacks.
That guy was a baller.
I had a son who was right-handed, and I want him to watch somebody just for form, watch his footwork and watch his arm. If you want to copy somebody throwing the football, Kenny Anderson would be as good as any.
Number 14 is quarterback Kenny Anderson, the field leader of the Cincinnati Bengals. This young man out of Little Augustana College can do it all.
Anderson was hot like WKRP's Johnny Fever on a Monday night in '75, throwing for a career-high 447 yards. But this four-time Pro Bowler was known more for accuracy than distance.
Ken Anderson's numbers blow away most of his contemporaries. He was completing 62% of his passes at a time when the NFL average was 52%.
When we did the research study on the best quarterback seasons of all time, Ken Anderson had 2 of the top 10 seasons, 1974 and 1975. In '74, he led the league in both completion rate and yards per attempt.
He had a +10 win-loss record for the Bengals. I mean, when you win 91 games for the Bengals, you belong on some list. Plus, great mustache, very 70s.
He was running a Bill Walsh offense before anyone knew who Bill Walsh was.
He was, in a lot of ways, I think, a prototype for what Bill Walsh wanted at the position.
Bill and I spent a lot of time working together. Anytime you take a kid out of Augustana College, it's going to take a while for him to come into the National Football League. And we spent a lot of times on basics and looking at film.
He was one of these guys that if you could ever get a bead on him, you could get to him. But it was the 1-2 drop, boom, and he just dinked us all the time. We could never get to this guy.
Thanks to you, it works. For all of us, the United Way.
Kenny wasn't one of those quarterbacks that you just wanted to go kill. He was a good guy that they respected.
Though Anderson was righteous, his Bengals were 0-2 in the playoffs during the '70s.
We weren't good enough around him. I'm willing to admit that.
You had to go through Pittsburgh, and there was no way you were getting through Pittsburgh at the time.
But still, some think his spot at number 8 on our countdown is totally bogus.
Ken Anderson at number 8 for the all-time quarterbacks of the '70s is just an absolute travesty.
Ken Anderson needs to be higher on this list.
You know, he's not a Hall of Famer, but I think he was one of the real good quarterbacks of the '70s.
That's too low for Ken Anderson. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. There's a big push for it, and he should get in there.
With only 10 spots on our list of top quarterbacks of the '70s, we had to burst a few bubbles.
When I look at the list, and I don't see Dan Fouts.
Damn it.
So, I have a little trouble with that.
Son of a...
Yes, Dan Fouts is a Hall of Famer who quarterbacked 7 years in the '70s, including a 4,000-yard All-Pro season in 1979.
In '79, they were the best offense in the league, one of the best in history.
But most of his career was played in the '80s, including 5 of his 6 Pro Bowls. If we could have extended the list, Fouts likely would have been our number 11.
11, that's okay.
But like it or not, this is only the top 10, so let's keep on trucking.
The number 7 quarterback of the '70s, Billy Kilmer.
For anyone now to look at Billy Kilmer and be told that that was one of the great quarterbacks of a decade, they're going to have a hard time with that. They see Cam Newton.
Unbelievable football. Like he was running an obstacle course.
And they see Billy Kilmer. Put those two guys side to side. See what you got.
They were to run Billy Kilmer through the combine and see him pass like that, you'd say, oh, okay, this guy's not even going to work. He'll be a lineman or something.
But once the game started, none of that stuff seemed to matter.
Kilmer began the '70s with a bunk 2-win season in New Orleans.
And I just think, damn it!
But his fortunes changed in 1971 when George Allen was named coach in Washington and he started bogarting quarterbacks.
When George Allen took over the Redskins, he had Sonny Jurgensen.
But George believed in Billy Kilmer. He thought this guy was a winner, and he wanted to get a second quarterback.
I would imagine that they might trade him.
Then it proved to be a brilliant move because Jurgensen got hurt. Kilmer becomes the starting quarterback and wins the NFC Championship in 1972.
Turned out to be one of the great acquisitions in history.
George brought Billy in for the very reason that he was so tough.
If you were starting a list with the players of that era that had the biggest heart, I think you'd start with Billy Kilmer.
You'd always see him. He'd be getting punched in the nose.
I told him, I said, you got to stop this bleeding. And he went over there. He was better than any cut man in pro boxing.
Billy really should have been playing for a blue-collar town instead of Washington. He'd have fit better with Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Buffalo because that's the kind of player he was.
The Bears' defense dominated the game and left Washington's offense as shredded as a Nixon memo.
The reason why I believe Billy should be on this list is because of his toughness. It certainly wasn't because of the beauty of his passes, I can tell you.
He threw about the most ugly ball you ever saw.
If you saw the ball, he may not be in the top 25.
I don't think there were too many spirals that Billy Kilmer threw.
Receivers like Charlie Taylor and Jerry Smith now went all out to pull in Bill Kilmer's wobbly ball.
Every time as a Redskin fan watching him, I'm like, why can't he throw the ball like other quarterbacks?
That's my fault.
And it was like, hey, that's just how he rolls, man. Just go with it.
That's why I tried to hit you in the chest, and I didn't.
Ugly passes and maybe uglier wins, but he did win. I would find room on this list for Dan Fouts, and it might be Billy Kilmer who might suffer my Turk.
And you're out of here. You're out of here.
You know, Dan Fouts, half his career was played in the 70s. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's not on the top 10 list. Billy Kilmer, I don't think really is a threat to be a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame at this point.
I'm totally going to defend Billy Kilmer on this list because he looks like he would be playing football in the backyard of the Brady Bunch.
I don't think you could leave him off that list in the 70s.
If we're talking about the big arm and all the measurables, then no, he doesn't belong on this list. If we're talking about winning football games, just look at the results. He belongs.
You know, as a starting quarterback with the Redskins, he never had a losing season with them, and he took them to the playoffs on multiple occasions.
This ball goes to Billy Kilmer because he...
Cardinal cool in the hottest situations is a matter of heart. Quarterback Jim Hart.
Jim Hart was the guy who had decent receivers. He always connected on his passes, never won games.
During his 18 years in St. Louis, Jim Hart lost more games than he won. But in 1974, 75, and 76, the Cardiac Cards were among the NFL's most exciting and successful teams.
They only played 14 games then, but they went 31-11 in 3 regular seasons behind Jim Hart.
But Hart and the Cardinals looked like Scoobies at the disco in the playoffs, going 0-2.
It was such a bummer because he was a great quarterback. Jim Hart was on the Cowboys. He definitely would have won some playoff games, maybe a Super Bowl.
A lot of us being in the right place at the right time.
And one dynamite place to be for a quarterback is under the tutelage of the mad genius, Don Air Coryell.
We drank the wine, we ate the crab.
When Coryell wasn't talking to a phone on a tree, he was dialing up the most advanced passing offense of the decade.
And Don would always be yelling, throw it. I mean, it'd be 3rd down in inches or 4th down in inches, and he'd say, throw it, throw it. And say, okay, Don, okay.
Coryell's bombs-away style attack helped pile up the numbers. Only one quarterback on our list passed for more total yards and yards per game than Hart did during the 70s.
That Coryell offense, everyone associates it with San Diego, but it really started in St. Louis.
And, of course, the biggest thing is the trigger man, the guy playing quarterback.
I think that's a pretty good spot for him. You know, some would argue it should be a little lower, but I think that's a very, very good spot for him.
I have a real issue with Jim Hart being on this list. He played for 18 years. You know how many of those seasons he had more touchdowns than interceptions? 3. He's number 6 on the list. You guys are out of your mind.
I'd probably move him up.
No, Jim would be a little lower than, in my opinion.
Hart was a guy I think people always underrated. For a couple years, Jim Hart was as good as anybody in the game.
And now, the number 5 quarterback of the 70s, the Snake, Ken Stabler.
5. Ken Stabler, the Snake, man. That was the guy.
Come on, 5. Ken is 5. This guy, please, check his comebacks.
He could hit a gnat in the ass with a football from 40 yards out.
All pro a few years.
The most underrated quarterback in the decade.
Super Bowl winner.
No one looked like him. No one played like him. No one talked like him. Really, no one won like him in the 70s as well.
Should be at least in the top 3.
Okay, in the huddle today, we got the Snake at quarterback.
Snake Stabler.
The Snake. The Snake.
The Snake.
Seems that a lot of people in the NFL have nicknames. Yours happens to be the Snake. How'd you get it?
An old high school nickname, returning a punt back and forth across the field. Somebody said he runs like a snake, and it stuck around.
The 70s was kind of a renegade era.
40 renegades together, you know.
Nobody embodied that period like Kenny Stabler did. The long hair, devil-may-care.
We were just a bunch of fun-loving guys that push curfew a little bit. Don't let what you do the night before affect the way that you play the following day. And I don't think we ever did, but we did have fun and read the game plan by the light of the jukebox sometimes.
As a young Catholic kid growing up, you could look at Ken Stabler and think, you know, there is another way to live this life, and it might be more fun than the way I'm being taught.
He was very unstabler, if you ask me.
I'm a kind of a percentage passer. I throw a lot of things with percentage throws.
He was a perfect guy for that tease him, then go long. He was deadly accurate with intermediate passes with Fred Biletnikoff or with Dave Casper.
He's got Casper!
But then Cliff Branch and he just had this symbiotic relationship.
Born on Christmas Day, Ken Stabler had a hand in the Holy Roller and a few other of the decade's most miraculous moments.
Raiders have scored on the most absolutely impossible dream of a play.
And when you threw the sea of hands against the Dolphins, it was his defining moment as a quarterback.
Well, I have to talk about Goes to the Post. My memory of him will always be the double overtime game on Christmas Eve when they beat us.
Casper makes it over the shoulder catch.
He was one of those players that would capture the moment of greatness.
What he had was a great insight, a great ability to make the big play when he needed to.
Always a showman, our number 5 quarterback led the Raiders to 5 conference championship games and a win in Super Bowl 11.
Yasha Heifetz never played a violin with more dexterity than Kenny Stabler is playing the Minnesota Viking defense.
Every time we play, we always give the people $8 worth or whatever the tickets cost.
I had all these ideas. You know, let's do this. We'll go to that. Boom. He goes there. You go there. So I'm facing the field, and Stabler's facing me, and he says, "You know what, John?" I go, "No, what? Yeah, what? Yeah, what are we gonna do?" Go. And he goes, "Yeah, boy," says, "these fans are getting their money's worth today, aren't they?"
Come on. I just think he had it all.
What a joke.
Guts of a burglar.
I'd rank the Snake number 1.
It's a crime that Kenny Stabler's not in the Hall of Fame. A joke.
Get this thing right, guys.
The number 4 quarterback of the 70s, Bob Griese.
You know Griese. What?
Bob certainly had physical skills and was gifted as a quarterback.
What?
He was just like a surgeon out there.
What?
He was the master chess player. He was the guy that was moving all of the parts around.
4?
He is in the Hall of Fame, so obviously people felt he was a pretty good quarterback, but they didn't call on him to do a lot.
All he did was, here, Zonk. Here, Merc. Here, kick. And then once in a while, ball. Mandich.
Every pass hurt you when you were playing against him. I don't know there was ever a smarter quarterback, at least during this era. I have scars on my soul from him.
Ball control, and that's what this was, a ball control team.
Give it a Zonka.
When he had Jim Kick, Mercury Morrison, Larry Zonka, they're a running team.
He would have games 10 for 12 for 295 yards, and one would be a 75-yard pass to Warfield.
Understood Don Shula's system probably better than Don Shula himself. He was an unselfish person. As long as the team won, he was happy.
The quarterback should be happy with the team performance and not with individual performances.
Though not known for primo stats, Bob Griese Lightning's passer rating for the decade is the highest of anyone on our list. Can you dig it?
Vitalis Dry Control. A man's hairspray. Nice game, Bob.
But despite 6 Pro Bowls and 9 winning seasons in the 70s, critics aren't down with his mellow numbers.
What did he throw, 7 passes in the 1 Super Bowl? I know he won, but he's got to do more of it, see?
Greasy wasn't a great passer. His gift was he was a great quarterback. He knew how to manage a game, set up a defense, and run the plays he wanted to run when he wanted to run them.
I think he's too high on that list. He shouldn't be ahead of Kenny Anderson.
I might put Stabler ahead of him. I might not, but look, if Bob would have been on a team that didn't have a running game and that was forced to throw the ball, who knows, maybe he'd been a little bit higher up.
Bob Greasy kept a little secret through the early part of his career. He was actually legally blind in one eye.
He always struck me as more of a guy in the control room at Cape Canaveral than he was a quarterback.
He was coming off a mediocre season when he finally started wearing the glasses.
Obviously, everybody knows you've been wearing glasses this last year. What kind of response have you gotten?
I got a lot of letters from a lot of parents saying, for once I can get my kids to wear their glasses.
Well, Bob, if a professional quarterback can wear glasses in front of millions of people on a Sunday afternoon or a Monday night, so can a network sportscaster. This is Phyllis George for CBS Sports with Bob Greasy in Miami, Florida.
The 70s was an interesting decade for hairdos and don'ts.
The big afros, yeah. Everybody had an afro during that time.
I had a perm in the 70s. Would you believe that?
You had afros on one side, and you had long hair on the other side.
Right, the longer the better. As long as you knock the snot out of somebody, you know, I don't care if you look like a groupie from the Grateful Dead.
I try to forget it, really.
Longtime Oiler Dan Pastorini had the locks and lifestyle to make our list.
I was a young teenager at the time. I remember looking at Dan Pastorini and thinking, let's see, he plays in the NFL, he plays quarterback, and his wife is a Playboy model. Yeah, that's the trifecta. That's about as good as it can get.
Houston fans might think he should be number one on our list.
Number one in the nation.
And though Pastorini was hipper than the Mod Squad, he only made one Pro Bowl, and he never threw more touchdowns than interceptions in a season.
Unless it's hair, I don't think Pastorini gets on this list, no.
The number 3 quarterback of the 70s, Terry Bradshaw.
Terry Bradshaw wins 4 Super Bowls and he can't even get first. Terry doesn't get any respect. Of course, he can't spell respect.
I don't know what more you can do than Bradshaw did. He was in 4 Super Bowls. He won 4 Super Bowls.
Although there was a time early in his career where the defense did have to score for us.
Before Bradshaw was the big ragu in Pittsburgh, he was a buzzkill for the Steelers.
And unfortunately, early in his career, when they didn't win, he got the bad rap.
Even his own head coach sometimes was not on his side. You know, when no one's on your side and they're hollering and screaming at you and you keep playing, you got something inside you.
He was not a Pittsburgh kid. He was a kid from Louisiana.
Did I think he lit it up off the field? No, he always seemed a little socially awkward. When he got on the field, was he a killer? Were they afraid of him? You're damn right they were.
From 1972 to 79, Bradshaw won over 75% of his regular season games and went 14-4 the playoffs.
Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20, the 10, the 5, and it's a touchdown for Pittsburgh. Bradshaw!
He had a rocket for an arm.
There's a blonde bomber. Yeah, the guy had a freaking gun. It's one of the 5 best guns that ever played the game. You better have your cup on, man, because it was coming in at Nolie Ryan speed.
To this day, I don't know how you throw a football with your finger on the point. He did it, and he did it masterfully.
When the ball releases, then that's the last finger that leaves the football anyway. And I always felt like it was like, this finger was like a whip.
I say he won the old-fashioned way.
They could beat him with a pipe, and he'd still go back out there.
My era kind of football, drop back, and you had to wait till they got open down the field and take your lumps.
Here's Bradshaw. Glenn Swan is open. Got it. Steeler touchdown.
He should be number 1, probably.
He's not? Well, you need to redo this whole show.
How he's number 3 in terms of quarterbacks of the 70s, I have no idea.
The guy's got more rings than a married pimp. And you know something? That's what matters at the end of the day.
I mean, I guess if we're not weighing the biggest game of everybody's life, then this is perfectly fine. You know, Bradshaw won 4 of them and never lost.
When you win 4 in 6 years, nobody's better than you. That's how you make spaghetti, with sauce. 4 in 6 years. Lop it on. I got no time for this 3 and...
When you say that Terry won 4 Super Bowls, now his team won 4 Super Bowls.
Because he played with 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers, a Hall of Fame tailback, a Hall of Fame center,
a Hall of Fame coach, and, oh yeah, 4 more Hall of Famers on the greatest defense of all time.
Look, 4 Super Bowl wins are 4 Super Bowl wins, and that has to matter. However, when you talk about Steelers' 70s dominance, where does that conversation start? It starts with defense. It doesn't start with Terry Bradshaw. It just doesn't.
I think you got him rated good. I think he's right where he should be.
I think he should be number 2.
I would put him lower on this list. He simply didn't have the numbers to be considered one of the top quarterbacks in the league.
Bradshaw had the lowest completion percentage and threw more interceptions in the 70s than any quarterback on our list. And only Archie Manning had a lower passer rating during the decade.
But I'm comfortable with the idea that when a guy wins 4 Super Bowls, we put him high on a list of top quarterbacks. I understand how that works.
A few players fell short of our list because their best days were behind them. In the 60s, the Rams' Roman Gabriel went to 3 Pro Bowls. But in the 70s, with Los Angeles and later Philadelphia, he lost more games than he won.
That's how we won this game, a lot of balls!
We were guaranteed controversy with another omission.
That's a joke. Come on. Yeah, Namath is not on this list.
After winning the Super Bowl in 1969, Broadway Joe's star began to lose its luster.
By the time we get to the 70s, he's got no knees. He's playing for the Rams. Maybe his best moment is on the Brady Bunch set.
With 5 Pro Bowls in the 60s and 4 more in the 70s, our number 2 pick was as groovy as Greg Brady's own room.
The number 2 quarterback of the 70s, Fran Tarkenton.
Number 2. I'd say the first thing that comes to my mind in the 70s would be, I don't know.
You have to put him in a category all of his own.
Let me think.
His mobility changed the defenses.
I'm just so flustered.
First of his kind in terms of quarterback who could beat you with his feet as well as his arm.
I mean, come on. Fran Tarkenton, baby.
I don't have enough hands to clap when you say his name. I need more hands.
Sometimes you just wanted to say, throw the damn ball.
While his freewheeling style had others tripping, Fran Tarkenton made it to number 2 on our list by having the most passing yards and touchdowns and the highest completion percentage in the decade.
He was like the little kid in the backyard, you know, who just came up with plays and say, you go here and you go there, and don't worry about it, I'll make time so you can get open. He absolutely drove defensive players crazy.
Tarkenton was a pain in the ass. He'd gamble, he'd run anywhere. I mean, he'd run up in the stands if he had to. On a hot day in the Coliseum, chasing Fran Tarkenton is not what you wanted to do.
I always hated Tarkenton. I really did. I mean, that little wimp would run around out there for hours and hours and hours.
I was always distressed when I saw quarterbacks, when their protection broke down, just to give up and fold themselves in the pocket and accept the 7 or 8 yard loss and go to the next play. And I just made up my mind when I got up to pro football that I was not going to give up on the play ever.
The face of Francis Tarkenton, perhaps the best quarterback in football today, one of the best of all time.
Though our number 2 quarterback won 6 division titles in the 70s, going 0 for 3 in the Super Bowl was a real bummer.
He was a great quarterback. But again, when it came down to the ultimate test, he didn't win it.
Sometimes you think you'll never get to the Super Bowl, then when you get there, you think you never will win it.
Every team he lost to was better. The 73 Dolphins.
The Dolphins have now established clear superiority in this game.
The 74 Steelers.
World champ, number 1!
The 76 Raiders. They were all better. Not even debatable. No question about it.
A tremendous quarterback, and I would never penalize him for not winning a championship.
After all those Super Bowls Fran Tarkenton lost, I think he should be happy to be the second best quarterback.
To have a guy with 4 rings versus a guy with no rings, you can't have Tarkenton ahead of Bradshaw.
I'm surprised you were smart enough to rate him that high, because most people don't get it.
Do you?
Remember, when he retired from the game, he held all 4 major passing records in attempts, completions, yards, and touchdowns.
Rolls to the right, dumps it out, caught by Foreman, touchdown! Tarkenton's record-breaking 291st career touchdown pass.
Should he be ahead of Terry Bradshaw?
I can't put him ahead of Stabler. I just can't.
No.
Well, I don't know who could be 1 if he's 2, because he was the best.
And now, the #1 quarterback of the 70s, Roger Staubach.
Roger Staubach clearly is one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time, and certainly the greatest quarterback of the 1970s. You cannot go against Captain America.
Sorry, but the Captain America of America's team, the goody two-shoes, you just wanted to vomit.
He was a good Christian guy. He was a clean guy. The only thing he did that was mean was beat you if you were on the other side.
I mean, there's nobody that travels in that kind of cloud except for Jesus, all right?
For 3, set.
Whether you dig it or not, no quarterback on our list had a higher winning percentage than Roger Staubach did in the 70s. He also won 2 Super Bowls before retiring with the highest passer rating in history to that point.
Roger goes deep across the middle. Clutch Johnson caught. Touchdown!
He was Staubach, a great quarterback, but he was also Staubach, the leader.
Play together all day long. Let's go.
If he came today and said, come on, we're going to get in a Thunderbird, put the top down and drive off the bridge, you'd probably go.
He was the best 2-minute quarterback in the history of the National Football League.
Well, the Cowboys need a miracle.
He was going to find a way to get it done.
Roger takes the snap, humps it once. He's going long. Down the near sideline for Drew Pearson. Pearson makes the catch at the 5. Touchdown! What you believing?
We're always down by a few points.
And that may be more than the Cowboys can overcome.
Then all of a sudden, they'll start showing the damn credits.
And a brief respite from the activity and a chance for us to salute the folks who worked so hard to bring it to you.
Even though I knew it was 1 minute and 16 seconds on the clock, I would say, no, don't show credits.
Can they come back again?
Short yardage. Robert Newhouse up the middle. Just a little punch a little bit, right?
42 seconds left in the game. Redskins lead by 6.
Damn it, if Roger ain't do it, man.
Staubach throwing in the end zone. Tony Hill! Touchdown! Tony Hill!
I knew they would pull it out. I knew it.
Just another day at the office, Brad.
Back in the 70s, you were either with the freaks or you were with the straights. Well, he was decidedly with the straights.
He had this choir boy image, although he wasn't a choir boy.
You know, I enjoy sex as much as Joe Namath. Only I do it with one girl.
Staubach was the antithesis of the 70s.
Staubach indeed lacked the mid-decade attitude and haircut, but he provided plenty of razzle-dazzle with his legs and was surrounded by enough America's team flash to gain style points on our list.
Even when they broke the huddle, they went down, and they came up again and went back down again. Coolest thing in the damn world, man. That's like making love to a lady, man. You come in the room, you lay on top of her, kiss her forehead, you get up and do something else. You come back to her, let her marinate, throw the lady off, throw the defense off.
There really wasn't anybody in the 70s that would deserve to be #1 more than Roger Staubach.
You're serious, right? You're gonna give it to Staubach?
Whoever's making that list is a resentful Dallas fan.
I gotta go Bradshaw one because Bradshaw owned Staubach.
Head-to-head with Bradshaw, Bradshaw won 2 Super Bowls and Staubach lost 2 Super Bowls.
I don't know how I would argue with that.
But even when he lost, he fought down to the final second, and it was defeat with honor.
Boy, this Cowboy team has not quit. They never do anyway.
He just needed a couple more minutes, and I think he would have beaten the Steelers in both of those Super Bowls.
When Roger goes to bed, when he picks his rings off, you hear plunk, plunk. When Terry goes to bed, you hear plunk, 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 plunk. End of discussion.
The way that he handled himself and defining himself as a quarterback, I would place Roger Staubach as #1 in the 70s.
Staubach had fewer rings, but he topped Bradshaw in every major passing category during the decade.
You look at some of the seasons that Roger Staubach had, where he only threw a handful of interceptions in a season. Incredible accomplishment at a time when the other Hall of Famers have 15, 20, 25 interception seasons on their resume.
He's got the stats, and he has the leadership, and he has the wins, and he has Super Bowls. So he's got every part of the argument.
You could fly over the cuckoo's nest picking apart our countdown.
Who is doing these lists? Evidently, they were not born during the 70s.
I look back at these, there's some really losers in here.
Ooh, 70s a tough decade for QBs, wasn't it?
Woo! Billy Kilmer?
I mean, let's face it. The quarterbacks of the 70s, I mean, you have to pad this resume a little bit, all right?
It's a classic football quarterback debate.
But this much is certain. No position stirs up more controversy than quarterbacks, and no decade unveiled a more colorful crop than the 1970s.